All right. So we're here. This is Barbell Therapy, and today we're talking about stress. So, this is a topic that I know we all deal with to some extent or another. And my premise, the way that I would want to start this discussion is saying that the way that we manage stress, it affects our ability to manage stress. And and then you have that an element of toughness training. There's I mean, we can just go in any direction with it. The first thing that I like to identify is the difference between the positive stress and the negative stress. So of course we call the positive stress would be eustress. We tend not to really think about that one so much, but we can have like major positive events in our life, and we may discount the fact that that is a stressful situation that has to be managed to some extent. The the thing that we mostly focus on is distress, and that's what we consider the negative stress, or more commonly just stress. And then I like to look at stress from at least three different point of views, the main being the physical, mental, and emotional. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. So Aaron, you want to jump in? You have any early thoughts on stress that you want to talk about?
Yeah, yeah. So stress is essentially what keeps me in business. From the coaching side of the house, from the exercise physiology and all that. What I do as a coach, and specifically as programming, the entire premise, the entire foundation of programming is essentially managing stress. So stress is essentially a fire. A fire can burn your house down, or a fire can be managed and controlled and turned into a tool. And so when we manage stress right, um, we can take that and turn it into a tool, and allow the body to adapt to that stress. And essentially, that's when you get exercise from just being random, turning into training. Right, it becomes organized. You have control over the stress. You manipulate the stress, and from that manipulation, we get adaptations. And that's my entire job as a coach, is to manipulate stress for the better. And then when stress is too much, to be able to adjust on the fly and to make the appropriate changes. And I think that's where the wisdom of the coach kind of comes in. The the textbook can kind of help out a lot with how to manipulate stress, but it's just comes from straight up years of experience and intuition as to how to adjust stress on the fly and continue to make it
Right.
productive.
Right. And let me jump in real quick. There was something that you said that was
Go for it.
really important that summed things up for me. You said stress is a tool. So, you use the example of the fire. Well, when I think of tools, I think of a hammer, for example. And that hammer might be used to build a house, or to hang a picture, or to do something positive. It can also be used to, break into a jewelry case. It can be used to assault somebody, to hit them over the head. So the tool itself is not necessarily good or bad. It's just like in the case of stress, we tend to only see the negative part because we think about it as being in a state of stressed versus being in a state of no stress. And we generally tend to prefer the state of no stress, meaning all stress is bad. But looking at it from the way that you pointed out, that stress is a tool, then that means that that tool can be used in a positive way, can be used in a negative way. So basically what we're looking at is, how well do we manage stress? Positive, negative, indifferent,
Right.
regardless. So, you have, in your work capacity, you deal with managing stress in the physical realm mostly, and using physical stress and adaptation as a way to get stronger and therefore handle more stress. So, is there
Right.
anything in particular, like, and I really want to talk more about psychological, emotional aspect of stress. But I say we just dive right in with the physical stress and adaptation, overload. I mean, where do you want to jump in there?
Sure. Yeah. Um, yeah. We'll definitely start there. Just to kind of give definition to it all. The When we're talking about generally, a lot of times in the literature and then through just professional conversation, external loading is kind of viewed as the physical stress, and we take that into consideration and manage that during training. However, there is a lot of evidence on internal loading, which is the subjective stress, right? The day to day life, how somebody's handling, how somebody's responding, what's going on in their life, and there's been so much data collection on that internal loading that we can actually quantify that as well too. And again, that the quantification of internal loading comes a lot more from coaches' experience, wisdom, intuition. Um, but we'll dive into that after we take care of the external loading. So
So
when
just
we're talking
before
about
we go on, can you
go
give
for it.
just a little bit more about the difference between the two, the internal and the external, to just so we can wrap our
Yeah,
head around that
definitely,
concept?
definitely keep me in check, so because
Yeah,
I can go off
yeah.
on rants, and we need to keep it down to earth. So when I'm talking about external loading, I'm talking about squatting, sprinting, running, uh, breaking a sweat in the gym, working out,
Okay.
pumping the iron, climbing the steel, running the marathon. Physical stress, like you talked about. When we talk about the internal loads, we're talking about um, everything that's subjective. So the physical is objective, right? If you pick up a 20-pound dumbbell, no matter who picks it up and what time of
Okay.
the day, it's going to be a 20-pound dumbbell. Um, the internal is much more subjective, right? You wake up, you broke up with your girlfriend, you just failed a test, and you stumble into the gym. There's a lot of accumulated internal load that could potentially affect your external loading in terms of how we train you. Um, so essentially, the internal loading is just what you said: the emotional stress, uh, the
Okay.
spiritual and emotional side of the house rather than the physical. So internal and external is kind of how I distinguish uh, your physical external and
Okay.
spiritual emotional
Okay. So
internal.
so let's say I come to you and I may not necessarily tell you that I had a horrible day or anything like that, but from a coach's perspective, you see that my performance is just not what you would expect. Or on the flip side, I come in and I'm a rock star, and I mean, how do you, how
Bingo.
as a coach, like, do you change programming? Do you manipulate the external loads? Like, how do you handle that, like, as a coach?
Ab- Absolutely, really good. So that's a good point. Usually, a lot of times when we talk about um, managing life stressors, we associate it to like, oh, we have to back the athlete off, we have to back the client off because they're having a bad day. But you hit the nail on the head. You can have the opposite effect, right? They could come in and they could be smashing their weights, smashing their run times, blown out the water, and essentially because of whatever factors that are outside of our full comprehension, um, that they're performing so well that what's laid out in front of them for the day is
Right.
not enough stress potentially.